Tensions are high following reports that North Korea has a missile-ready nuclear warhead. The latest threats about attacking Guam. In response, Donald Trump was at his diplomatic best.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
Hard to believe it was just a couple of days ago that Secretary of State Rex Tillerson made this statement.
We have reaffirmed our position towards North Korea, that what we are doing, we do not seek a regime change. We do not seek the collapse of the regime. And we're trying to convey to the North Koreans, we are not your enemy. We're not your threat. But you are presenting an unacceptable threat to us. And we have to respond. And we hope that at some point they will begin to understand that, and that we would like to sit and have a dialogue with them about the future that will give them the security they seek.
And Secretary Tillerson was back at it today, assuring us all.
I think Americans should sleep well at night, have no concerns about this particular rhetoric of the last few days.
I'm not done. A declaration met by this morning's tweet from the president. My first order as president was to renovate and modernize our nuclear arsenal. It's now far stronger and more powerful than ever. So is Tillerson or Trump getting it right? Joining me to discuss that more is Congressman Seth Moulton from Massachusetts 6th District. He is a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
Good to see you, Jim.
Who's on the right track? Either of them, Tillerson or Trump here?
Well, neither is on the right track, but I'd certainly side with Tillerson in this debate. You know, I agree with Senator McCain, who said that this kind of rhetoric is dangerous. It's dangerous for our national security. It's dangerous for Americans and our troops in Seoul. The tough part of this is that there is no military solution. I went to South Korea just a couple months ago, talked to the commanders on the ground. We cannot just take out the North Korean nuclear arsenal without them launching an artillery attack that would literally kill tens of thousands of Americans, hundreds of thousands of South Koreans on the first day.
But Tillerson wasn't talking military. He was talking talk. Isn't that the route that people like you prefer?
It absolutely is. I mean, that's what we have to do. It's a little frightening when you have a commander-in-chief and a secretary of state who are clearly not on the same page.
You know, virtually everybody I speak to, elected or unelected, thinks that Kim Jong-un is unstable, unhinged. A lot of people who serve with you think the President of the United States is unstable or unhinged. Are you amongst them?
I don't know if I'd use those exact
what words
terms,
would you use?
But I would certainly say erratic, uncontrolled emotions, someone who cannot be trusted. I mean, we literally can't trust him to speak the truth every single day. And, you know, that's frightening in a military commander. I mean, when I went to Marine training, you could fail a run, you could fail an academic test, but if you lied about anything, you were gone the next day, because integrity is so important when it comes to our national security. You have to trust what someone says. People can't trust Donald Trump.
You know, putting aside how extreme the rhetoric was, this fire and fury thing, what's the difference between what Donald Trump said yesterday there and what President Obama did when he drew that red line vis-a-vis chemical weapons and Syria? Was that not just as dangerous as what Trump is doing?
No, not at all. Now, I disagreed with President Obama when he drew a red line and then didn't follow it. But the red line that he drew was completely reasonable. We could have responded in a reasonable, acceptable way to Assad's use of chemical weapons. In fact, I even praised President Trump for doing that, although I clearly said that if he does anything further, he needs to come to Congress first. That's right. That's right. But the use of chemical weapons is not acceptable. But here's the problem. What Trump is threatening against North Korea is not a good military option. So he's not even on the same page.
Well, there's no good military option.
There isn't one. So if you're threatening that, I mean, this is like a classic chicken hawk, right? I mean, Donald Trump is a chicken hawk. He took 5 deferments, privileged deferments, so that some child of a working family could go instead to serve in his place in Vietnam, and now he's acting as a tough guy on the international stage. When you act as a tough guy, as the commander-in-chief, threatening military options that are not good military options, then people don't believe you.
And for those who don't know, that just came from a guy who served 4 tours of duty in Iraq. Ed Markey, your colleague, has filed a bill with one of your Democratic colleagues in the House that says no president of the United States can launch a nuclear attack without a declaration of war by Congress. That does not even have a snowball's chance in hell of passing.
It doesn't. I mean, well, the reality is that this is the kind of legislation we have to consider because we have such an untrustworthy, erratic commander-in-chief. But actually a pillar of our nuclear deterrent is the fact that we can respond quickly. So if the Soviets were to, the Russians now, were to launch a massive nuclear attack on us, then we could respond without having to go to Congress first. So that's actually a fundamental part of our nuclear deterrent. That's the problem with the legislation. But this day and age, the fact that we have to consider these things because we have such a crazy commander-in-chief, that should be frightening to everybody, to our allies, to our troops, and to Americans at home.
I want to talk to you about a piece in Politico that was a little bit shorter than War and Peace by a few pages about you. Generals love him. Top Democrats despise him. Can he be president anyway? We'll get to the latter in a minute. Generals love you. Do you love them? Are you anxious or comforted by the coterie of generals that surround the guy you just described as crazy in the White House, Donald Trump?
You know, I think civilian control of our military, civilian leadership of our government is a principle that we should always try to uphold. So I don't like the fact that there are only generals around the president. The only people who anybody seems to be able to trust are all sort of the same, from the same background.
Mattis,
right.
And McMaster.
But
obviously,
when you go down that list, especially Secretary Mattis, he is the kind of person that you want in the room to prevent President Trump from doing something crazy.
You served under him, did you not?
I did. I served under General Mattis in Iraq.
This morning, we learned about a pre-dawn raid at the home of Paul Manafort, former campaign manager of Donald Trump, and most significantly also at the infamous June meeting in Trump Tower with Donald Trump Jr. and with Jared Kushner. A while ago, you described behavior around that meeting as treasonous, and when we spoke to you on the radio, you said you're not a constitutional expert. So I think you...
Not a lawyer.
Okay, fine.
One of the few in Congress who's not a lawyer.
Okay, but you're skilled enough to know, put the treason issue aside, do you believe, based on what you do know, Congressman, that the President of the United States has obstructed justice, has committed an impeachable offense? Do you believe either of those things?
Yes, I do. I mean, I believe
Both.
that I believe that from what I've heard, from what I've seen, that he has absolutely tried to obstruct this investigation, and that he's done things that fundamentally are hurtful to our own country. You know, if you collude with our greatest enemy of the last 65 years to try to get yourself elected, that's something that just in principle you should be impeached for. Now, look, we need to have time for these things to play out. You know, that's why I've said that rather than rushing to judgment on impeachment, we ought to try to talk about what we should be doing rather if we didn't have all these problems with Trump. You know, that's why I'm focused on getting new people elected to Congress, on winning back the majority, all those things. But this is about the common sense test, right? Like, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a constitutional scholar or whatever. But I'm just, as an ordinary American, I'm saying that if you're colluding with Russia to get yourself elected, there's a big problem here.
So just to be clear, I know this is not your preferred order of action. If there were articles of impeachment on the House floor today, you'd vote for them?
I'd look at the evidence first. I'd look at the evidence.
But you think he's obstructed justice? Is obstruction of justice not an impeachable offense in your estimation?
I think it should be. But I think it's also important, Jim, that we go through the process with the investigation, that we get to the bottom of this, and then we can move on with the things that Trump promised us we would be doing, the things we should be doing to restore health, to improve health care, to restore the economy, to move the country forward.
Speaking of service, you are involved in a couple of organizations. You sat here a couple of months ago with Emily Cherniak, I know, who convinced you to run with something called New Politics. Serve America PAC is something else you're working with, where you've endorsed a bunch of men and women who, what criterion is there for Seth Moulton to endorse such people for Congress?
At a fundamental level, you have to be willing to put the country first before your party's politics or your own personal politics. And this is a quality that I see in a lot of the folks who have put their lives on the line in our military. You know, I was with Mikey Sherrill, who's running down in New Jersey this past weekend. She was a Navy helicopter pilot, was in the Navy for longer than I was in the Marines, did extraordinary things, risked her life for the country. She gets what it means to be a leader who you trust. People aren't going to vote for Mikey because she's a Democrat or because of a particular issue that she has. They're going to vote for her because they believe that she can get this country back going in the right direction.
We have only a minute left for that other piece, that Politico piece. You're going to the annual...
You can skip it if you want.
What? No, let's not. You're going to the annual Iowa steak fry in September. Do you know who's been there in prior years?
I don't know, but
well, I can tell you. Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton. You don't represent Iowa. I can't. You represent the North Shore, don't you?
No, but look, I've gone to Iowa.
How can you say you're not considering running for president? CNN the other day has a graphic on the screen, likely candidates. You may not have said it. Your picture is amongst them. You're going to Iowa. You're not even thinking about this, Seth Moulton?
Look, I didn't put my picture on CNN.
I understand that. You're going to Iowa.
I was invited to Iowa because along with Tim Ryan and Sherry Bustos, the other two people who are going, we are people who are advocating for change in the Democratic Party. We're people who are saying that, you know, Democrats have got to look ourselves in the mirror and say, we've lost a lot. We've lost the trust of the American people. We need some new energy. We need some new leadership. That's why I'm supporting these candidates who are running in 2018. That's the kind of change that we're
But this
building.
Is not a Sherman-esque no. This is I'm not running now. That's all it is.
Look,
right?
I'm not running. I'm going to Iowa because I'm going to tap into the tremendous activism that is in Iowa and can help us win in 2018 to restore some balance to Washington, to get people in public office who deserve to be there because they're going to put the country first.
Congressman, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for your time. Congressman Seth Moulton, thanks.